Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Writers Chat. This is where we like to gather together as writers, talk about all things for writing, by writing, and just to kind of get our writers' juices going. And we've got a really neat topic. And I want to say hello to my co-hosts today, Johnny Alexander, Brandy Brow, and my name's Jean Wise. We got Melissa in the chat room, and a lot of our good friends I see are signing in on the chat. So it's so good to see you, or if you're watching us on the replay. We're always glad to get together and talk to us about writing. It's fun. And we've got a special guest today and a great topic. The topic is myths and facts about grants for writers. This is something I don't think we've ever talked about before on Writers Chat. So this is going to be, and what a wealth of information we have for you. So I'm going to turn it over to Brandy to introduce our speaker and get us started for today. So take it away, Brandy.
It is my tremendous pleasure to welcome our guest today, C. Hope Clark. She is fabulous. And let me just introduce a little about her. C. Hope Clark is founder of fundsforwriters.com, a website designed by Writers Digest. I said designed, I meant designated by Writers Digest for its 101 best websites for writers for 21 consecutive years. That's pretty impressive. The site's free weekly newsletter contains contests, grants, markets, and publishers and agents, reaching 23,000 writers. Hope is published in Writer's Digest, The Writer, Writer's Market, The Right Life, Making a Living Writing, Writers Magazine UK, Guide to Literary Agents, SC Wildlife, and more. She presents virtual writing classes and a monthly blog on freelancing under the Web Writer's Digest umbrella. She also pens mysteries and is an award-winning author of 3 series totaling 15 novels, the most popular being the Edisto Island Mysteries. She is under contract for several more, and you can find her at www.chopeclark.com, also fundsforwriters.com. Hope, thank you so much for coming. Please share your wealth of information with us. We're excited to learn about grants.
Well, this it can fill up an hour because I've taught hours and hours on this. I've taught 3- and 4-hour classes on this. They're out there. They're not just out there to pick up off the street, but I mean, you do have to work for them, but they are out there. I will say, due to the economy, they're probably smaller than they used to be, but that just happens. Grants are, as the economy's wealthier, grants are wealthier. Because the money comes from return on investments, so it just makes sense. But grants, people don't understand grants aren't just in one place. You know, grants can have all kinds of faces and personalities and sources, and it takes a little while to understand them, and that's the reason a lot of people don't bother applying for them. It amazes me how few people apply for a lot of these grants. They can be a little intimidating. The reason I can talk about them is that in my prior life, before writing, I was working for the federal government, and I was steeped in grants and low interest loans. So I understood the environment, and as a result, I understood the state environment, and it didn't take much for me to learn the nonprofit environment. So I have an idea where they come from, where grants come from, and why and how you need to apply for them. But I always start off by saying you need to know your state arts commission. That is the #1 place you need to understand that grants can come from. And a lot of writers have no idea, other than, you know, they just sponsored a conference somewhere, but, you know, nobody pays attention as to who they are and what their purpose is. But you see major conferences in your state, even some smaller ones, or speakers or artwork, and somewhere you'll find the little insignia for the State Arts Commission, which meant they gave a grant. They gave a grant for it, because that's a requirement of a grant, is that whoever receives it has to post, promote, advertise somewhere where they got their grant money from. But an arts commission is probably the broadest type of grant that you can get, and it is specifically for the arts. Every state has a different personality. Every state has a different amount of money because their own legislature determines how much money they get. Some states like the arts better than others. So it just depends. I try to keep up with all the states. It's a lot to do. Some of them are not as active as others, and it'll amaze you some states that are better than others you wouldn't fathom. I mean, you'd think California would be all over it, and they're difficult. They're very difficult. They're very complicated. Wyoming is wonderful. It just depends on what they like. There's also a National Arts Commission. We'll cover that in a little bit. Extremely competitive, but they fight every year to get funded. And of course, depending on which administration is in office, depends on how much money they have. There are Humanities Commissions, and there's a difference. There's a difference, although they do kind of blend. Humanities Commissions are in every state as well as one at the federal level. And they tend to lean towards just presentations, projects, events that address the humanities. And that can be history, philosophy, culture. It can cross over into the arts. But as you can see, it can open up to writers as well, just with those topics alone. There are retreats all over the place, all types of getaways to write. And most of those come with some type of fellowship, scholarship, stipend, grant money. There are fellowships at colleges and universities, and that does not mean you have to teach a class. Some of them are nothing other than they appreciate your work. You're applying based on your portfolio, and they want to give you time away to write. You just have to be accessible to students. Museum and library grants. Not every library, not every museum has them, but you might be amazed at how many do. They don't broadcast them very much. The only ones I ever see advertised are the monster libraries in Boston, New York, Chicago. But it doesn't hurt to ask your state library. I'm not sure your local libraries are going to have that much money, but I'll get into them in a little bit. But libraries have access to grant funds as well. And so, well, this might be as good a time as any. The year before COVID, that seems like eons ago, I worked with, I had heard that a group of libraries in various counties in my state, which is South Carolina, had applied for and obtained a grant to teach rural communities how to write. They want to just emphasize how to write and how to put a story together, and if need be, how to get it published. And they were looking for somebody to work with to present those. I heard about that in my writers group, the South Carolina, which one was it? It might have been Sisters in Crime, but anyway, it was with a writers group I was with. And they said in their news, oh, libraries looking for somebody to work with them on their grant. And everybody just blew it off. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to even give a hint that I'm interested in this. And I contacted them. I was the only writer that contacted them. And by the end of that year, I had done enough presentations to put $8,000 in the bank.
Wow, that's something, Hope.
Okay, you know, it's a matter of stepping up and just willing to work with these people. But libraries get grants all the time, and they're easy to work with. But we'll go to that in a little bit as well. Professional organizations. Every state has professional organizations. Well, some of them are clubs, some of them are organizations. Then you've got the national ones, you know, romance writers, which might be kind of limping along these days, mystery writers, you know, sci-fi, fantasy, SCBWI for children's. All of these organizations have some certain degree of grants. And they don't go out there and just blast the news about it. Why? Too many people would apply. You know, they don't have the manpower to sit there and sift through 500 applications. So they're on the website, And amongst the chartered members in their little newsletters, they might say, hey, the deadline for this is, and that's all you hear, but they're there. Also for conferences, any conference that's out there, they may not advertise grant. I used to belong to the South Carolina Writers Workshop, and I was a faculty member on several of their conferences. And I knew they had grants for people to attend the conference, but they didn't tell anybody. Because invariably somebody had the guts to come up and go, I can't afford to come. Do y'all have any assistance? Oh, well, as a matter of fact, we do. And that's how they addressed it. Nonprofits, and I'll talk about fiscal agents in a little bit. Nonprofits, any nonprofit can apply for grants. And that means that you can piggyback on those as a writer. And then there's fiscal agents, which kind of goes along with what I'm talking about. You can actually apply for a grant through a fiscal agent. They apply for the grant. They get money out of the grant to run the grant, and you get your grant money without having to directly apply yourself. So that kind of gives you the categories that grants fall into. I'm going to go into some more details as we go, but I'm going to hit these with examples pretty fast because there's a lot of them. And that's the reason I gave you a handout, so you can have these to reference back to. State specific grants, that's your arts commissions and arts humanities. And there are retreats, there's nonprofits, they get very state specific. They want to take care of their own. There's not a state out there that doesn't have an assortment of these. And again, always start with your arts commission, because those do have individual grants. Some have 1 or 2 for individuals, some have a dozen. Some will fund just some little project and give you $100. Some will pay for a lot more and give you 5,000 to 10,000. So you just need to know your arts commission. I've got Michigan, Wyoming, Alabama, and they're all funded right now. Nobody's without. There were a few years where Kansas went without. Kansas shut down for a little while. Some states, depending on the politics, have a lot more money than others. You would think that the high population areas would have more, not necessarily so. They may not like the arts. So it just depends. And then you'll get into some bigger states that will delegate it out. So instead of all the money being up in the state arts commission, they have delegated out to arts councils throughout their states. And some states are better at this than others. God, I tried to cover. What I did is I asked Melissa, I said, okay, can you tell me where everybody's from? Because normally when I speak to a group, I'm like, okay, we're mostly in this state, mostly in that state. And she was like, okay, Alabama, Vermont, Wyoming. She's just going down this list. And I said, okay. Can't cover them all. But she gave me a list, and I tried to put something to every state that was on that list. So if she missed you, I mean, if you want to email me, I can probably send you 2 or 3, no matter what state it is. But take a look at those, because even though those are not your states, they give you an idea as to the types of things that are available. You see the arts commissions, humanities commissions, like Kentucky has Kentucky Foundation for Women, and they provide 2 grants every year, and several of those. As long as you can guess, it's for the social advance for women, or women who have been set back socially. And some of it is historical, some of it is cultural. But if your project taps into what they stand for in any way, you may be eligible for a grant. And those are in the thousands. Those are not little bitty $100 grants. Like in Vermont, the Vermont Studio Center, that thing's been around forever. And they have just gobs and gobs of grants for people who want to get away into their center as a retreat type affair or a class. They have grants available for writers that want to attend. And they're not just defined to Vermont. So everybody can take a look at that. That's the reason I went ahead and put all these. You may think you don't apply. The Florida Writers Foundation is similar to the Kentucky, similar to Vermont Studio Center. They may be open to anyone, anywhere, as long as you're coming to Florida, maybe touch on Florida, or maybe you want to appear in Florida, whatever, just don't blow them off because they have a state name in them. But I will say the Arts Commissions and the Humanities Commissions are very state specific. They will actually require you to have lived in the state 1 or 2 years, and that you promise you will live in the state for the duration of the grant if you get it. Okay, let's go to the national grants. National Endowment for the Arts is the big one. That is the big one. I remember when they were $40,000 a piece. Now they're 25. So inflation has hit the arts, and it is well funded this year. And it surprises you when they're funded and when they're not. And it is extremely political because they are a national agency. So you can imagine, I think and I hate playing politics, so I won't say one side or the other. I've seen it almost shut down and not funded. And then I have seen it have gobs of money, just gobs and gobs of money. So every year they hold their breath as to how much money they're going to get. Those are 25,000. They're highly competitive. And I've known people who applied 5 and 6 times before they ever landed one. Now to get one, it's not just, I'm a writer, I want this to live on, I have a project in mind. You're going to have to be a little more savvy than that. You're going to have to show a portfolio of what you have done to prove you are a writer. Because you write does not necessarily mean you are a writer to the National Endowment for the Arts. You have to be published. Now that you might be journalistic in nature, you might be short story, you might be poetry. Just know that you have to have a portfolio to show, to prove that you are who you are. General grants, and these are the fun ones. These are the ones that go to all over the place, and just about anyone can apply. Some of them have a few requirements. The Sustainable Arts Foundation is not incredibly old. I'm not sure it's 10 years old yet, but you have to have children to apply to it, which I think is cool. They set up for parents.
I'd like to interject just for a minute on that one. They have also now added an ability for people that have adult special needs children that they care for, so they will cover those as well, which is a really nice option.
Yeah, they're cool. They're very cool. A Room of Her Own has been around forever. The Room of Her Own Foundation, which, that comes from, Virginia Woolf, but and they have their grants used to be bigger, but they're still in the 4 figures. And they want to give money to women to be able to write. Again, you probably still need to prove that you are a writer, which might mean publication. And the reason for that is a lot of people want to be writers, but if they haven't published, they haven't gone all the way through. They haven't practiced the entire the depth of being a writer, I guess you could say. We can all write, but how many take it to the next level? As you can see, there's the Howard Foundation. The Gulliver Travel Grant is specifically for travel writers. That one's kind of cool. Malice Domestic is for unpublished mysteries. I'm a fan of that one, of course, because I write mysteries, and a lot of these grants I can't apply for because you'd be amazed at how many, especially with the Arts Commission, that if you write pure commercial genre, so romance, mystery, sci-fi, fantasy, the commercial stuff, that's what they call it, not the literary stuff, the odds are a little bit against you. So you'll see a lot of people consider that not real writing. You're not Pat Conroy type writing, or you know what I'm saying. But you've just got to know the flavor of the organization to know what they like, and you always look at who's won in the past. And it doesn't hurt for you to contact these people. They have people employed, especially at the Arts Commission. That's all they do. You have people employed at these agencies, foundations, nonprofits that are there to take the phone calls, meet the people of those who want to apply for the grants. They have to justify their existence. So they want people to be successful after they got their grants. So what they're going to do is groom the applicants. You know, they love seeing the talented come through there. So if you go to them with a draft of, say, your application and say, how does this sound to you? They'll sit down with you and go over it with you.
In my former life, I was in public health, and we had grants all the time. And often when in the application process, I would call down to the State Department and with a series of questions. And I was just always surprised because they give you ideas.
Yes.
They were extremely helpful. And sometimes you learned something that other grantees didn't, and kind of give you a little bit leg up on that. Yeah. So
they love it. They I mean, you're justifying their job. And they want the coolest projects to go through. So if they, you know, and it doesn't hurt to stroke it a little bit. I mean, you get in touch with these people, you become be known on a first name basis with these people, so that when you apply, guess what? You got a little bit of an edge. You already know these people. And I've seen it in practice. I've been on grant panels before and watched these applications come in, and you will see the member of the foundation or the commission get up there, and they have to do like a little quick 5-minute presentation. Okay, here's an application, and they want to do this and this and this, and they're asking for $5,000. Okay, and they will actually slip in there if, okay, I know a little more about this one, and they will put their opinions in. And there's nothing against them being opinionated. If you've never contacted them, all you got is the paper. If you've contacted them, somebody's liable to give their little 2 cents as to whether or not they think you're serious. I mean, it could go against you, but then again, hopefully you're contacting them to make your application better. You'll see, you know, I've got a list of Amy Lowell poetry, travel poetry. I mean, you know, it doesn't get any more specific than that. The Barbara Deming Foundation has been around for, gosh, decades, and people are not aware of that. The Elizabeth George Foundation is very generous. She is very generous. I've known several people who have won those awards. So writing organizations, hopefully everybody knows PEN. They're huge. They're very literary. I'll warn you that ahead of time. The SCBWI that I mentioned, Sisters in Crime. You know, it's I don't know if any of y'all are members of Sisters in Crime. I was for years and years, and they have some grants for first-time mystery authors. So these organizations tend to take care of their own. Mystery Writers of America has several, and Horror Writers of America Association. The Residencies and Retreats, these are fairly well-known ones that I've got down here. I'm looking, like Bellagio's huge. That's a big one. That's a really, really prestigious one. But then you've got Writers Colony Fellowships that may not be as prestigious, but you have a better chance of getting them. So take a look at each one to see if it fits what you're trying to do. There's even one in France. I've seen them in Scotland. I've seen them in Ireland. I actually had a Funds for Writers reader win one in Scotland one time. I was just so proud as punch with that. Okay. And then conferences, like I said, anytime you see a writer's conference, if it's going to pinch your pocketbook, give them a call and say, y'all wouldn't happen to have any kind of financial assistance for going, and they just might surprise you. Now, some of them may say, well, would you man a station for us, or would you man the bookstore for us, you know, for 2 hours a day or an hour a day, and then you could have the conference for free. They're always looking for work in kind type of things. So that's always arrangements too. Or they'll give you access to the conference, but not a motel room, or the motel room, but not the conference. You know, it's just all out there.
It shows the value of asking and connecting and networking on that level even. Yeah.
It really does. It really just ask and the networking alone. Okay, so you may not get it that time, so next time you might. It all works. It all adds up. You climb the ladder. Script writing, TV writing. I don't get too deeply into that. That's not my world, but there are a few pretty major grants for that, more like fellowships. But what they often do is hire from those people in the long run. Libraries and museums, these are big ones that I have here. Check with your local ones and just see what they've got going on. I have even offered, I stopped myself. I got that grant, I'm talking all over the place. That grant that I worked with the libraries on, and I helped them write some of their material because some of them were young librarians who weren't sure how to quite write the grant stuff. They were following a form and I was like, if we word it like this, you got a better chance. And I was trying to help them along a little bit. And before long, they said, would you write up this part? I'm like, if I'm getting the grant, if I'm getting paid, absolutely. I'll go the extra mile. Because what a lot of people don't realize, a grant is more than the form. If you just fill in the blanks on a grant, you cannot see personality in that. If you're just flat answering questions, people aren't sitting on that panel wanting to see how accurate you are. They're wanting to feel drawn into a project. This is the arts. This is creativity. It's not like you're applying for educational funds or health funds or anything like that. This is creative endeavors. You've got to be creative on that page. So the judge or the panel that's reviewing these needs to look at this and go, oh, I'd like to be a part of that, or I'd love to have helped with that, or what a cool idea. You want to draw them in. You're a writer. You need to even fill out the forms creatively. So don't just put a noun and verb and, an answer. Think about how you're answering on this. However, that doesn't mean you shouldn't get your math right. I sat on a panel for $10,000 grants for the arts. And there was a room of a dozen of us. And they want people from all facts of life to be on grant panels. So you're looking at it from all different directions. So that you can have business people, you can have artists, and you can have musicians judging dance. You can have all types. You can have entrepreneurs. You've got all types, so that you're looking at this from all angles, because these grants are going to people to put information out into the public. So you want to make sure it's covering all angles. And I was there as a writer, but they also kind of tapped me because of funds for writers too. They knew I understood grants. So I was sitting on the panel, and in a big group like that, I'm not a huge talker. I'm going to absorb it first. And you always let the talkers talk. And they were going over, oh, what a cool project. And it was a cool project. And it got around to me, and I said, there's a $1,000 math error on this. And how do we know they're going to manage the money that we give them? I see that just about killed their project. So it might be a cool project, but also make sure your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed and your numbers add up. I've got some emergency grants down there. And yes, I know people who have gotten those emergency grants. But once you get one, it's hard to get another one. They're not going to keep funding you. And I get requests daily. How can I get an emergency grant? I'm a writer, and then they launch into all the emergencies in their life. And by the time you read their story, they just threw writer in there and hope that they qualified for a grant. It's common. And they're used to that. They're people that give grants out are tainted. They're looking for the cons. They're looking for the people just wanting to put money in their pockets. Another reason your application needs to be slick, cool, well-written, and just feel genuine and something that they want to be a part of. Fiscal sponsorship. What you've got, these are entities And because it says New York Foundation for the Arts does not mean they're restricted to just New York writers or New York artists. Fiscal sponsors actually are out there to apply for grants for you. Okay, now you have to work together as to which grants you want to apply for. And what they do is apply for the grants you can't apply for as an individual. In the United States, the grants are given more toward nonprofits, governments, other entities because of the tax code. Okay, when you give away money, you're giving it as a tax write-off. Nobody gives it away out of the goodness of their heart. You know, because you've got a board of directors and you got people you got to answer to, because even a grant provider has to account for the money and show that they are doing it not necessarily as a profit, but they're not just throwing money away. They have to be accountable. So anyway, you got these fiscal sponsors that will apply for you for things you can't apply for as an individual. And then what they in turn do is you get your money for your grant. It comes through their coffers, their spreadsheets. They manage the money. So there's a little more accountability to it, but you're getting your grant money. I don't know that you want to keep up with those ledgers anyways. And they usually get a 5%, 10%, 12% of the grant money to keep them running. So it's how they justify their existence. That's a fiscal sponsor. You've got New York Foundation for the Arts, Creative Capital, and Fractured Atlas that do this as an entity. That is what they do. But any nonprofit can actually do it. So if you know of a particular nonprofit and you think that what you do somehow taps into who they are, and you say, hey, can I work with you on a grant? You might just open the door to more grants that they can apply for that you can't. What you are is an item on a spreadsheet to be paid out of that grant, if that makes sense. So you become a part of the grant. It's their grant, but you've worked with them to get it because you wouldn't get it otherwise. So it's a lot easier if you go into one of those three sites. They will take you in baby steps through it as to how it's done and what it means. So it's not difficult to understand. And then of course the journalism grants. There's a lot of those out there. Those are just the big ones that I put down there. Any questions? I've talked a lot. Any questions real quick before I go into a few other things?
We do have a couple. Some people wanted to know the difference between a fellowship and a grant.
They're basically the same thing. They're giving away money. Usually with a fellowship, it's affiliated more with an educational arm. So you might have a fellowship at a school, a retreat. I have seen grants called fellowships and fellowships called grants. Normally you give something in return for a fellowship, whether it's a presentation, or if you're an artist, a piece of art, piece of poetry, or you've got to be available for students, or you have to do a presentation. It's just a fellowship. Usually you have to give a little bit of something in return, but it's usually not much. But I have seen, like the arts commissions, a lot of them will call their grants fellowships for artists. And those fellowships are usually really, you present what you want to do with your grant. It's not just giving you a grant and say, here, go spend it. You've got to say what you're going to do with that grant. And it might be work on your next novel. Okay, that's fine. You're accountable right there by at the end. If they want you to be accountable, say, how much did you get written? Is it done? Can we see a draft? Whatever. That's about as far as it goes. So don't confuse them. Just if you hear one, you just hear the other.
That's good to know. Thank you.
I'm just amazed at how specific the niches are. And I think it was Dennis that asked about Christian nonfiction, which is really a broad field. So are there broader, or how specific is there? Talk about the niches a little bit, maybe.
It can be broad. These grants can be broad or very nichey. it, oh gosh, I was looking at the Sisters in Crime one. That one has got a lot of specifics in it. It's got to be crime fiction. I think you have to not be published before. I happen to know that the woman that they named this after is a woman of color. I don't think they've made that a condition. But you'll often see where you'll have these conditions and it may be very limited, 1 or 2, and it may be a dozen. You may have to live not only in a state, but within certain counties in the state. You might have to be under 35, over 50. You might need to be female. You might need to be a student or not be a student. A lot of grants, all of the grants with the Arts Commission say you cannot be a student because they have their own scholarships to apply for. They want to deal with people who are actually writers and trying to write for a living. To get the very niche ones, you're going to have to dig down into the very niche nonprofits and the very niche professional organizations if you want to get that tight. Now, you might get into, say, a Humanities Commission that covers, religion falls under it. If you can paint your project as to the far-reaching effects it's going to have and why it's so important for you to write this book and how important it is to so many people, the population it's going to serve, what the good it's going to do to humanity is what you're trying to do, then yeah, you might fall under the Humanities Commission for your Christian nonfiction. And it also depends on what libraries you have. If you've got a library and it doesn't have to be a public library, that leans toward Christianity. There you go. You've got to learn to kind of pull the threads and pull the pieces. Who is this entity that's given the grants? Okay, can you attach to any one of those little pieces that they represent? That's what you're looking for.
Can you do part of a story? I'm thinking of the novelist. I'm going to pick on Melissa, who writes about Scotland. Could she create, not right, but write for travel to go to Scotland for 6 months to study the castles in Scotland in order to write the novel? You like this story, Melissa? But anyway, is that as specific as you could do, or is it to complete the novel, I guess? Is it?
Oh, no, it's got to be about the novel. Well, it depends. Like I said,
Ireland. She's correcting me. It's Ireland, not Scotland.
Oh, heavens. I don't know of any more that are going to cover that big of a fee. The biggest one I know is the NEA for $25,000. And most of the rest of these are going to be from $1,000 to $10,000. But if you can, it's not just writing a book in Ireland. It's got to be, what's the point of the book? And what are you hoping to do with this book? How is that book going to make a difference to anybody? Or what are you trying to further? You gotta dig down into it and say, why is your work important? Not that you just want to be a writer. Actually, nobody cares about you wanting to be a writer. Nobody. That's not the fact. That's not the point. It's like readers. Readers don't care who wrote the book, except if they like you, they want your next book. That's it. They don't want all those details. And I get too many novice writers going off on a little tangent here with Funds for Writers that want to say, but they don't understand how hard it is. I said, they don't care how hard it is. Nobody cares how hard it was to make the shoes on your feet or the sofa in your living room. You just want it. You don't need the historical background of it. So you got to keep that in mind. How is your work going to make a difference? Not that you need the money to write. If that makes a difference. You got to be a little more altruistic about it. Does that make sense? But you can dig down and see who, you can go to nonprofits that specialize in Ireland, and those are all over the place. There's big nonprofits, organizations for because I've looked at the grants, Irish, Russian, German, Scandinavian, they all have organizations. It's a matter of getting in touch with them, and I guarantee you they all give grants for something. It's just whether or not you can make what you're doing fit what they want to do. So think about it other than just writing. Think about the subject matter. Well, and that, yeah, I'm jumping ahead on what I'm going to talk about. Any more questions to help out with that? Okay. On the myths, I'm going to cover the myths first, and they go by quicker. We've already covered some of them. There is no emergency today, grant tomorrow. There just isn't. You know, if you're in a pickle, you're in a pickle. We can't fix that for you. However, I know COVID had a ton of grants out there that gone now. People would announce I put out an entire newsletter that had hundreds of those back in the midst of COVID, but they went like that. And then there'd be round 2 and they'd announce it. And then a week, money's gone. It was very difficult to get a hold of those things. But a lot of writers had to prove they lost their publishing contract, or they lost their magazine gigs, or their blog gigs, or their rent, or, you know, you just go down the list where suddenly they were in crisis, and a lot of those grants were out there at the time. But I listed a few emergency grants, but every one of those you're going to have to apply, and it may take 6 weeks to hear back from them. So you can't, if you're in that dire a strait, a writing grant's not going to do it. Grants to stay home and write. I get requests for those all the time. I can't concentrate unless I'm writing full time or I'm writing from home. First of all, I can debunk that all day long. You know, to me, you can write anywhere. But, and frankly, a grant provider doesn't care. You know, they want to know how is what you're going to do make them look better. They got a mission too. So that's what you're going to look at. The fact that, you know, if they say, oh, well, we helped this writer over here quit her job and stay home and write, you know, nobody's going to be impressed with that. So that's not a good reason to put down. You never want to say it's for you. You never want to do that. It's always got to be the greater good. Grants for beginners, first books, to self-publish, total miss. I've had people ask, I've always written, now I want to write a book. Where can I get a grant to do that? And I say, I hate to break your bubble, burst your bubble, but there isn't one. Nobody's going to give you a grant for a trial run. You know, you got to prove that you are who you are. If they want a writer, they want a writer. So you need to be able to show it. Frankly, there's something called paying your dues too. And I'm telling you, if you're on a grant panel, they talk pretty frank, and they're going to look at this and go, who do they think they are, thinking they need a grant to even get started? They don't want to be a writer if that's the case. Does that make sense? You know, it's kind of a bootstrap type thing. Grants to self-publish a book are not writing grants. That's a publishing business. You're crossing over into the business side of things. I can count on one hand the number of business grants I have ever seen. That's a myth. That is a total myth. And I've worked with Small Business Administration. They will give you loans. They will advise you how to run your business and give that to you free. But to hand you dollars and say, here, go open a business, not going to happen. The same thing applies to, hey, I need $10,000 to go self-publish a book. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Grants to start a writing business for those that are freelancing. Or if you want to get into writing series, different series, whether fiction or nonfiction, travel books, whatever, to open a business, again, is a business loan, not a grant. Also, grants are not always about how poor you are. As a matter of fact, that can be a turnoff. Unless they specify right up front that need is a factor, that your financial need is a factor, don't mention it. I get a lot of people will write me thinking that they're going to butter me up to write a check. For some reason, people think I'm a grant provider, or for me to find them a grant, and they lead with, I'm retired, or I'm disabled, or I lost my job, or I'm an abuse survivor, or I can just go down the list. I had one last night that had all of them, every single one of them. I mean, writer was only the first line. I'm a writer. The rest of it was an epistle of everything wrong in their lives. And I wrote her back and said, this is not how you get a grant. You know, because I hate to say this, sounds really frank, but if you're going to show all your flaws or all your problems, it makes you wonder how productive you're going to be on this project you're wanting to do. So I can't say that too loudly in front of too many people because it sounds so nasty, but that's when you're dealing with money, it gets down to the brass tacks. Again, grant providers are responsible for how the money's spent. So that's most of the myths right there. I've given you a ton of facts, and a lot of them that I've got on this list I've already done. First of all, I will do a disclaimer, should have done at the beginning. Our knowledge of grants with funds for writers is the US, the UK, and Canada. Okay, they're similar, you know, they're sister countries, and they have a lot, because of their government and their tax base, they have very similar requirements. And sometimes you have to be a citizen of that country, sometimes you don't. Canada is very, very big on you being a Canadian. The Brits will sometimes say just the UK, and then sometimes they'll only say Wales or, you know, only Great Britain or England. You just got to read what the requirements are. But we know those because when you start getting into other countries, I don't know the tax code. And if you don't understand the taxes and how they hold you accountable for this money, you can't really advise on grants. Saying I need a grant does not qualify you for a grant. Just to let you know that up front. A lot of times, I've applied for just a couple of grants, fellowships, I'll put it that way, with the Arts Commission, but I write mystery, so I know the odds are against me for doing that, but I do it anyway and hope that some name recognition would come through. But I've not landed one yet. But I don't need the grant. I'm going to write my books whether I have the grant or not. And I'll tell you this, if anybody feels in your grant application that you're going to do this come hell or high water, whether you get a grant or not, that works in your favor because you're in it for the right reason. Your mission must meet the mission of the grant provider in some little form. Like I said, they have multiple threads out there. Use just the angle in which you look at it. I don't know if anybody freelance writes for magazines. I did that for a living before I wrote novels. And it's a matter of taking a subject and then going out there and saying, how can I make some angle of this subject fit that magazine and then that magazine and then that magazine? I did an article on the maintenance of old cemeteries. Yeah, I loved that article. I had so much fun doing that article and got to interview a foundation that maintains old cemeteries. And I sold that to a turf grass magazine. See, it's the angles you throw on it. Same thing goes for grants. Let me see what's this. We covered. Yeah, grantors, that's people giving the money, are looking for proposals that show credibility, strength, ability, and commitment. So you got to be a strong candidate in that you're driven. They need to feel that you're driven. You must prove you're qualified to fulfill this grant. That's going to be on the application. Why do they think? When they finish reading that, do they feel like you're going to follow through? Do know that grant money is income and it will be taxed. A lot of people think it's just a gift. Yeah, it's a gift up front, but you know, IRS is going to get their little piece of pie on the back, but you keep track of all your expenses too. It's just like anything else, any other business. There is no one size fits all application. Just like you would never write the same query letter to multiple agents, I would hope, or the same query letter to multiple publishers or magazines. Each one is going to be different and catered to them. Same thing for a grant. You're addressing the grant as if it is a person that you're trying to convince to write a check. And you're going to use everything you can learn about them to bridge the gap between the unknown between you. If there isn't a grant for your mission and you can't find one, please try crowdfunding. People are afraid of crowdfunding. It doesn't mean that because you apply for crowdfunding that your project, your campaign is going to be successful. You have to work it like everything else. And I've known a lot of successful crowdfunding campaigns, but they hit it every single day. They worked it every single day, trying to reach out to people, trying to find new perks to offer the people who pledge. I don't know why more people don't do crowdfunding for their works, especially nonfiction, especially children's books. You know, children's books are so easy. You got visuals going on there that you can entice people. But crowdfunding is just a cool way to get money and publish. And at the same time, you've built up a following in your crowdfunding campaign. They're going to buy your stuff. I could do a whole class on crowdfunding. Unbound.com is a different kind of crowdfunding. And I just did a 3-parter in Funds for Writers from someone who made that successful. But they not only you crowdfund the campaign, you do a campaign working with Unbound, the company. And when you're done there, they help you find a publisher for it if they think that it's going to be profitable. All the other crowdfunding campaigns are just to get you money. They do help promote you. Don't bother getting a grant writer to write your grant for you. Unless a grant writer is an artist or understands the arts or the creative arts, they're not going to do you a good job on your application. And that feeling of what you're trying to do with your creative project isn't going to come through on paper. That, and you got to pay them. I mean, you can do this. You're a writer. When seeking grants, don't just think for writing. I tapped on this. Think about its contribution to humanities in all its various shapes and forms, contribution to education, subject matter. I mean, you can look at disabilities. If you've got a children's book on disabilities, you don't just apply to writing grants, apply to nonprofits that deal with the disabled. Gender, weather, science, you know, there's all types of them out there. Think other than just writing. History, setting. A lot of these are very geographically specific. Presentations. If you kind of slide over into library funding, you will see they have gobs and gobs of funding to put on programs in the library. Now, if you're familiar with those and you walk into a library and say, hey, I can help you write a grant on this. I'd love to be a presenter to make this type of project work. They're going to go, hey, especially if you want to write the grant, sure, we'll do it. You know, you work with them, you know, give and take. Partner with schools. I didn't cover the arts commissions in great depth. I gave you enough, but they almost all of them have an artist roster so that schools can apply and go down that list and go, oh, what they do sounds good. I want to have them come speak to my class. Now, it could be a one-time presentation. It could be an entire semester's teaching and everything in between. You might have a once-a-week presentation to an arts class, you know, and then by the end of the year, they've all written a play or they've all written a mystery or whatever it is. So the sky's the limit, and teachers are wide open for suggestions. Let's see. I put one example, think outside the box, and I use mystery. I'm going to preach mystery. you could actually approach a school and say, this is problem solving for students. Or you can incorporate classics like Sherlock Holmes, as well as incorporate what you know in mystery, your books, as to how what you do is like Sherlock Holmes. You just got to think creatively. And the best way to learn about how to write a grant is to serve on a grant panel. I really suggest you look at that. Every arts commission and they're going to do more virtual now than they used to. So it's no longer driving to your state capitol to sit on a grants panel. They might be able to do it on Zoom and sit on a panel and see what all is involved in applying for a grant to get your little knowledge as to how you can apply for your own. And they love it. There's always a need for grant panelists, and some of them actually pay for your service. And of course, put yourself on any kind of speakers roster. The Arts Commission has the Artist in Education that I just talked about. The Humanities Commission has a speakers roster. And I know I'm on South Carolina speakers roster. And all these libraries, schools, nonprofits, museums, anything that can be charitable, any of these groups can contact the Humanities Commission and go, I was looking over your roster and I want Hope Clark to come speak to us on, and I've got a list of topics I can speak on this. Okay, they contact me and say, you're wanted for this presentation. Are you available? And I go, yes. I drive there because it's in South Carolina. I drive there, put on my 1 hour, 2 hour, whatever they want presentation, and drive home. $250, just like that. It's easy. And whoever applies for you, it's a 1-page application. They go, oh, we want Hope Clark because, fill in the blank. And then the Humanities Commission pays me. So don't overlook the speakers rosters. That's it in a nutshell. I've thrown a lot at you, a whole lot at you, but I'm trying to give you opportunities for whatever kind of money is out there to help you with whatever you're doing.
That's
Any
amazing.
questions on
That's
that?
amazing. Brandy, you want to answer us on air the question you just got asked about finding grant panels?
Yeah, somebody was asking. Yeah,
Go to
yes,
Arts
yeah,
Commission
through there.
page. Your state arts commission will have we'll have it go to where the grants page is. Normally they'll have a little announcement there if they're in need. Sometimes they don't. Always sign up for your Arts Commission newsletter.
Okay.
It will always be in there. I've seen 3 in the last 2 days.
Wow. This has been
Great.
fascinating.
Now I have a question. You mentioned that there's not really very many legitimate business grants. I'm curious, what about the Amy grants for women? Because that's marketed as a business grant for women. Is that legitimate?
But it's not called a business grant. She's marketing to women, right?
Yeah, it's called Amy Grant for women. Amy's Grants for Women. There, I think, if I remember correctly, it's been a little while since I've looked at it. I think there was like a $10 application fee, and application fees for grants are not all that uncommon, from what I understand. But there was a large payout, and it was one that seemed to be fairly well marketed. So I thought it perhaps was legitimate, but since you mentioned they're not really out there, I was curious what your thoughts were.
I'll look it up. Keep in mind the original intention of a grant. For that one, you're going to have to be a woman to apply. There's a reason for that. And often you look at their mission statement and it'll tell you why they came to be who they are and what their goals are. And it will probably be very definitive. And it might be that they wanted to aid women in establishing business. And it might even go into what kind of business or where, or, you're looking for those definitions that you can lock onto that you qualify for. But any nonprofit can give for whatever they want to, as long as it serves their purpose. And if somebody is I can set something up and just do it for writers if I want to. I've toyed with doing that. I've given grants before without becoming a nonprofit, to attend conferences, that type of thing. But I write it off as a business expense rather than become a nonprofit. So you've also got, that's something I didn't mention, any business, let me just say not any business, any mid-sized business out there normally has a foundation arm. My dentist has a foundation arm. I'm saying, and many of them do. It's where they funnel money over there to do charitable works. And it's how, in years past, my husband and I coached a hockey team. So I go knocking on the door and like, hey, Greg, you got a charitable arm over here. I know how grants work. I need $500 for my hockey team. Just like that. But that's how they funnel their money into needs. If somebody as general as a dentist just wants it to sound good, he just wants his name out there. He didn't care. We had to put a big tooth on the jerseys, So yeah, anybody can set something up for a grant if they want to.
I thought it was interesting, Brandy, that you said that sometimes there are application fees for grants. I guess I didn't realize that. So, okay, so that's normal. We should not be put off by an application fee.
Not at all.
Okay.
There's a lot of scholarships these days that require an application fee.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, somebody has to process this paper.
Sure.
And so somebody's got to be paid. And, I can go into a whole tirade about contests where if I see something that has no entry fee, my red flags go up and I want to know why. I want to know where their money's coming from because I've known them not to pay winners.
Mm.
Money has to come from somewhere.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That makes sense.
All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour and a little bit beyond. I hope this has just been a wealth of information. Thank you so much for sharing all of this and for the handout, which provides additional resources. And we just hope that anyone interested in this will contact your local state organizations and do an online search, and probably most important is to subscribe to Hope's newsletter, because then you're going to get all kinds of information. I was a longtime subscriber for years, and I think something happened with my email address. I got a new email or something and kind of lost that, but I'm going to subscribe again. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. One last question just came in, so I'll do this one and then we'll wrap up. Leslie asked, is it better to reach out to a smaller organization or one that manages smaller ones when just starting out as a writer?
I don't think there's a benefit one way or the other.
Okay.
I really don't. You reach out to whoever you think's got grants, and I think community foundations handle a lot of smaller grants. That's what I think that sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to ferret out the small ones, a lot of times these small grant providers can't afford to keep a full-time staff or have many people on staff to handle all the applications. So they come under an umbrella for something like a community foundation that handles a bunch of grants. And so I think that's what it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If you know someone that handles at the lower level or the higher level, it doesn't matter. Use who you know first. But yeah, however you can access them, do it. And if you can't talk to one and it doesn't get anywhere, talk to the other. All they can do is tell you no. Really, I say that about submitting to anything. All they can do is tell you no.
That's absolutely true. So you don't know if you don't try. Next week, we're going to have our own Rachel Colby is going to be here. She's going to be talking about your writing journey. And Rachel, of course, as many of you know, she writes poetry, she does interviews, she writes newspaper articles. And so we're just really excited to have Rachel come and talk about that. And if you're watching the replay, we do invite you to join our Writers Chat Facebook group. Check out our Writers Chat page, which shows all of our episodes. And also, we'd love to have you join us any morning, Tuesday morning at 10 Central, 11 Eastern. Glad to have you here. Hope, thank you once again. This has just been a fantastic topic. And I believe Jeannie said at the beginning, you know, we've been doing Writers Chat for 6 or 7 years now, and this is the first time we've talked about grants. So this was really, really great to have you as our guest. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next week on Writers Chat.